Good evening, I'm Nadia Jani and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. China-US trade talks conclude without a deal to prevent tariffs from soaring again. The UK sets to recognise a Palestinian state unless Israel meets its conditions. And a powerful earthquake in Russia's Far East sets off tsunami warnings in Japan, Alaska and Hawaii. The United States and China have wrapped up 2 days of trade talks in Sweden. Both sides laid out their concerns. The US stated worries over Chinese overcapacity, and Beijing highlighted its frustration with export controls. Our correspondent in Brussels, William Denslow, has the latest.
The US trade delegation described this 2 days of trade talks as constructive, saying they'll be bringing back a positive report to Washington. The trade representatives, including US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, said that technical talks will continue in the coming days, and that will all be taken into consideration before Donald Trump makes a final decision on whether to go ahead and extend this tariff rate pause that we've seen between the US and China. He says that that is just one of the options that will be available to the US president, and he will make a final decision on where this trade spat will go next. The US representative said over the past 2 days of trade talks, a number of issues were discussed, with China touching on a number of the sticking points and concerns that the two sides have when it comes to trade. A huge issue as far as the US is concerned is feelings of production overcapacity and the impact that is having on US trade and global trade more broadly. As far as the Chinese delegation is concerned, well, they have issues when it comes to export controls from the US, something they want to see addressed. The trade team from Beijing said that they very much want to push for a continued pause of this tariff hiatus. They say that there was a candid exchange about economy and trade concerns. Over recent days, there's been plenty of speculation as to whether there will be a meeting later this year between President Xi Jinping and his US counterpart, Donald Trump. The delegations from the US in Sweden said that this was not an issue that was discussed. US President Donald Trump also taking to social media on Tuesday, saying that he is not seeking this meeting with President Xi. William Denslow, A News, Brussels.
US President Donald Trump warned on Tuesday that Washington will impose tariffs and other measures on Russia within 10 days, unless Moscow shows progress towards ending its 3-year war in Ukraine. Trump was speaking aboard Air Force One, saying he had not received a response from Russia since announcing the shortened deadline, reduced from the 50 days he initially set a month ago. He downplayed concerns about the impact of sanctions on global oil prices, pledging to increase domestic oil production. The president's warning marks a tougher stance on Moscow as he grows frustrated with Russia's refusal to agree to a ceasefire. The Kremlin says it has developed immunity to sanctions, having lived under a large number of them for an extended period. The remarks follow US President Donald Trump's decision to shorten the deadline for Russia to make progress towards ending the war in Ukraine. In response, Russia said it continues to take into account all statements made by the US president. As Europe deepens its support for Ukraine, it appears willing to absorb economic costs, including higher US tariffs, in exchange for continued security cooperation. To discuss this further, I am now joined by Nunu Wahon Martins, political analyst from Brussels. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
My first question is, how does Europe justify accepting higher US tariffs in exchange for continued support for Ukraine?
Well, the first argument is that Europe was afraid that President would able 30% tariff, so that's why they accepted to go to 15%, increasing the previous tariff that we had between the US and the EU. But it's not clear yet because we don't have the whole document signed and all the details. it's not clear in the sense of that specific tariffs are to support Ukraine. The support of Ukraine goes without saying, and goes also between the NATO agreement, where the Europeans have basically accepted to buy American and military facilities and instruments in order to give them to Ukraine.
And what role do you think the US and EU trade negotiations play in shaping Europe's security strategy?
So that's the thing. That's a very interesting question, because the fact is that with the new dynamics regarding the defense industry and the defense policy that the EU is implementing after more than 2 decades, putting completely aside, the interest by the European member states was basically to have developing within the member states the capabilities to make the defense industry purely European. As we have it today, we have different types of capabilities. They don't match, and with this new policy, the intention was that, but it looks like, according to this agreement, that at least the majority of the defense capabilities will be coming from the US. So for some member states, this is a blow, but I have also to say that the member states, before the agreement between Mrs. von der Leyen and President Trump, for sure have agreed with her on the conditions of the agreement. So let's see what the population will decide as well, because it doesn't look good in certain member states, and it doesn't look good in France, which was basically using this new policy to start implementing and increasing their own defense capabilities and sending them to the rest of the European member states. It's going to be very interesting. It's not going to be definitive by now, in my view, but it will be some interesting times ahead.
And just on that, because of what those interesting times ahead might look like, what do you think are the wider implications of this trade-off, for the transatlantic relations moving forward?
Look, the truth is that Europe is squeezed between China and the US. And for clearly, the EU sees the US as the major partner, and still sees the US as a partner for the globalized world and for the free market. So in that sense, it will be going without doubts, despite some discussions some months ago. There is no other option for the EU to have another partner than the US on one hand. On the second hand, it is also true that the EU will have to find other markets and other agreements globally. And thirdly, after the Ukrainian war and the fact that the EU is no longer buying natural resources and other materials from the Russians, it's also, and after what happened last week with China, a couple of weeks ago, where the Chinese clearly said that they cannot see Russia losing the war, it is clear that there is no other way than the EU has to somehow abide with this agreement on one hand, and secondly, at least for the time being, at least while President Trump will be in the administration, it has to be the favorable partner, and it will be the favorable partner for the EU.
Thank you for joining me, Nuno Wahin Martins. Thank you.
Thank you.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced that the country will recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless Israel takes decisive steps to ease the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and end the war. Starmer outlined 4 conditions for Israel.
Britain will recognise a Palestine state at the United Nations General Assembly in September if Israel doesn't take steps to end the humanitarian situation in Gaza and end the war. Prime Minister Keir Starmer made the announcement on Tuesday, outlining 4 key conditions for Tel Aviv.
End the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a 2-state solution. And this includes allowing the UN to restart the supply of aid and making clear that there will be no annexations in the West Bank. Meanwhile, our message to the terrorists of Hamas is unchanged and unequivocal. They must immediately release all of the hostages, sign up to a ceasefire, disarm, and accept that they will play no part in the government of Gaza.
Backing the Prime Minister's announcement, Foreign Secretary David Lammy reinforced the message.
His Majesty's government therefore intends to recognise the state of Palestine when the UN General Assembly gathers in September here in New York.
Liberal Democrat leader also, Sir Ed Davey, welcomed Starmer's announcement as a crucial step, but urged the government to act without delay. And more than 255 MPs, including more than half of Labour's parliamentary party, have signed a letter urging unconditional recognition of a Palestinian state. However, Israel's government has firmly rejected the UK's position. The Israeli Foreign Ministry accused Britain of pandering to domestic political pressure and rewarding Hamas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the move as dangerous appeasement, warning it would embolden terrorism at Israel's borders. US President Donald Trump also criticised Starmer's approach, suggesting it incentivises extremist groups and undermines prospects for peace.
Well, you could make the case that you're rewarding people, that you're rewarding Hamas if you do that, and I don't think they should be rewarded. So I'm not in that camp, to be honest. We'll let you know where we are in, but I am not in that camp.
Mr. President,
because if you do that, you really are rewarding Hamas, and I'm not about to do that.
Starmer's decision comes after last week, when France became the first G7 nation to announce it would formally recognise a Palestinian state in September, adding that to international pressure for a resolution to the Gaza conflict. However, not all European powers are aligned. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that Germany has no immediate plans to follow suit, arguing that recognition should be one of the last steps on the path to a two-state solution. Globally, around 139 countries already recognise Palestinian statehood. In 2024, Spain, Ireland and Norway joined that list, aiming to increase diplomatic pressure and support a ceasefire in Gaza. Though Palestinian representatives currently hold limited rights at the United Nations, their statehood is recognised by numerous international bodies, including the Arab League. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen. UN agencies have described the situation as man-made mass starvation, blaming the Israeli government for restricting aid deliveries to the territory. Israel denies the allegations, stating that no restrictions exist and that there is no starvation in Gaza.
Israelis are split over claims of famine in Gaza. While some deny it, others protested in Tel Aviv, calling for an end to what they see as deliberate starvation.
A new international warning over famine in Gaza has triggered strong and opposing reactions in Israel, from outright denial to protests on the streets. The latest assessment from the Integrated Food Security Phase classification said there's now evidence of widespread starvation, malnutrition and disease in the Strip. It comes as the United Nations says that there are more than 500,000 people, nearly a quarter of Gaza's population, who are enduring famine-like conditions. However, not everyone in Israel believes it.
What I think about the report of the IPC regarding the famine in Gaza is I think it's outrageous. I don't think there's a famine in Gaza. I don't think the situation there is ideal or very good, but I don't think there's a famine in Gaza. Over 600 trucks have gone in with aid and food, and I honestly don't think there's a famine in Gaza.
Some Israelis expressed compassion but said their focus remains on the hostages still being held in Gaza.
Everybody deserves good life and to be fed and to be loved, but we have hostages over there. We have people from our own that are kidnapped, and it's kind of difficult to think of the kids in Gaza first, for our people, our families, our brothers and sisters over there.
Outside the US Embassy in Tel Aviv, protesters held signs showing images of starving children and accused both Israel and the US of enabling a humanitarian disaster.
It's not hunger, it's starvation policy directed by the Israeli government, and it's very important to say that humanity is in a very bad shape these days while everybody is keeping silent about the most horrible crimes committed against the Gazan people.
Read the report today. It was heartbreaking, but anyone that has been following the news and listening to what Palestinians are telling knew that this was coming. This is actually a catastrophe.
Gaza's health ministry says 147 people have died of hunger-related causes, including 88 children during the past few weeks. However, Israel denies it's using starvation as a weapon, with Foreign Minister Gideon Saar calling such claims lies.
An 8.8 magnitude earthquake has hit Russia's Far East region, damaging buildings and triggering tsunami alerts from Japan to Hawaii. Residents in several countries are being urged to stay away from the coast.
A powerful 8.8 magnitude earthquake has struck off Russia's Kamchatka peninsula, triggering tsunami warnings across the Pacific. The quake, one of the strongest in the region in decades, has put several countries on high alert. A kindergarten was damaged in Kamchatka, but officials confirmed no children were inside and no injuries were reported.
Today's earthquake was a challenge for all of us. It's the strongest quake in decades of tremors. According to preliminary estimates by specialists and seismologists, the magnitude of the earthquake was 7.7 to 7.9, and there is a tsunami threat warning. That's why I am again repeating my plea to stay away from coastlines. Specialists have already begun a thorough inspection of sites and socially significant facilities for possible quake damage.
In Japan, authorities issued tsunami warnings for eastern coastal areas, with waves expected to reach up to 3 meters. Many have already found shelter in fear the warnings may become reality.
For citizens in the areas included in the tsunami warning, please evacuate to a safe place immediately, such as designated evacuation buildings and hills. We are receiving reports and currently monitoring for any details of damage or casualties.
The Japan Meteorological Agency warned that a major tsunami could continue for more than a day following the earthquake. Tsunami alerts have been issued for Alaska, Hawaii, Guam, and parts of Micronesia. U.S. officials warn hazardous waves could arrive within hours.
As the mayor indicated, our number one priority is to get people to safety. Our number one priority is life safety. And so right now it's an easy thing. Get away from the beaches, get inland, and get upward. So that's our message right now.
U.S. President Donald Trump took to X to urge residents in Hawaii to stay alert and follow local tsunami warnings. Authorities in affected regions are urging people to remain vigilant and stay away from the coast until further notice.
Our Asia correspondent Laura Westbrook has more on the impact the quake has had in Japan.
Japan upgraded its tsunami advisory to a warning, with its meteorological agency saying that tsunami waves could continue for more than a day after the earthquake. More than 1.9 million people have been asked to evacuate in Japan, with warnings spanning hundreds of kilometers along its Pacific coast, from Hokkaido in the north all the way to Wakayama Prefecture in the south. Now, residents under evacuation orders have been told to seek high ground and to stay away from the coast. Waves have been arriving in Japan. The highest was 1.3 meters in northeastern Japan. But the meteorological agency has warned that tsunami waves could reach up to 3 meters high. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said a task force is in place to assess the situation. And authorities have stressed that tsunamis could hit the shoreline repeatedly over an extended period of time, with later waves potentially larger than the first. And so it's told people to stay evacuated until warnings and advisories are officially lifted. Now, TEPCO, the company that runs the nuclear power plant, has said all workers at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant have been evacuated, but it added that no abnormalities have been reported. Now, this is something that is being closely watched because of what happened in 2011 when a tsunami triggered by a magnitude 9 earthquake resulted in a nuclear meltdown at that plant. Now, since then, there have been many precautionary measures that have been put in place, but this is a crucial area to keep safe, with tons of water used to cool nuclear debris and then stored in large tanks. TEPCO says it is continuing to monitor the situation. Now, elsewhere, from places from the Philippines to Indonesia, they've also been issued tsunami advisories. Residents have been cautioned against going near beaches and coastal areas. And Chinese authorities, too, have issued a tsunami alert for Zhejiang province and Shanghai, saying they expect waves of up to 1 meter. And these are areas that are already being impacted by Typhoon Komei. Laura Westbrook for A News, Hong Kong.
The Trump administration is moving to repeal the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's 2009 finding that labels greenhouse gases a threat to public health. Critics warn this rollback could erase decades of progress and worsen pollution, especially with changing climates impacting the rise of wildfires and floodings.
Environmental groups have blasted the move that the Trump administration proposes to end the legal foundation of America's climate policy. The administration wants to repeal the Environmental Protection Agency's 2009 endangerment finding that labels greenhouse gases a threat to public health. Activists say it spells the end of the road for US action against climate change. EPA's Administrator Lee Zeldin made the announcement on Tuesday and called it the greatest day of deregulation in American history. The proposal, which needs to undergo a public comment period, would cut $54 billion in costs annually through the repeal of all greenhouse gas standards, including the vehicle tailpipe standard, he said. The tailpipe emissions limits encourage automakers to build more electric vehicles, so if this goes, the car industry won't be pushed to make EVs. But 3 former EPA chiefs criticise the move, warning it risks millions of lives and betrays the agency's mission. Critics call it a kill shot designed to undo current and future climate rules at once. As well as vehicle tailpipes, the repeal would end current limits on greenhouse gas pollution from power plants, smokestacks and other sources, and hamper future US efforts to combat global warming. Legal experts say the repeal faces legal challenges, but if finalised, it could wipe out decades of climate protections and tie the hands of future administrations. As the planet warms and disasters grow more extreme, environmental advocates say the EPA isn't just walking away from climate action, it's working to shut the door behind it.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev signed 20 cooperation agreements during Tokayev's official visit to Ankara. The deals covered a number of sectors, including energy, transport, trade, health, education, tech, and justice. Key agreements focused on oil cooperation and developing freight transport along the Middle Corridor Railway. They also committed to partnerships in digital innovation, health, education, and urban planning. Additionally, talks included plans to boost Kazakh oil exports through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. Kazakhstan has reached an agreement with the European Union on coal shipments through Russian ports. As a result, the EU's 18th sanctions package includes certain exemptions. The transit of Kazakh coal through the selected Russian ports is now permitted again under specific conditions. Our correspondent Fariza Kalamazina has more details.
The European Union has made a limited exception in its 18th sanctions package, permitting the transit of Kazakh coal through select Russian ports. This information comes from Kazakhstan's Ministry of Trade. The ministry clarified that this exemption is very narrowly defined. It applies exclusively to coal originating from Kazakhstan owned by non-residents of countries under EU sanctions. Russian ports can be used only as transit points for loading or shipment, and storage, purchase or processing of coal in these ports remains prohibited. Earlier in February 2025, the European Union's 16th sanctions package had completely blocked transactions involving several Russian ports. This created serious challenges for the stability of Kazakh coal exports to Europe, especially affecting the port of Ust-Luga, which is a key transit route. Despite these restrictions, the European Union remains a crucial market for Kazakh coal. Last year, Kazakhstan exported 5.2 million tons of coal to Europe, generating more than $300 million in revenue. This accounted for more than half, or 51.8% of the country's total coal exports. And in the first 5 months of this year, exports to Europe reached 1.6 million tons, representing 38.5% of total coal exports for that period. Among the largest buyers of Kazakh coal are Poland, Italy and the Netherlands. Italy in particular increased its purchases by 4.4 times over 11 months, reaching approximately 230,000 tons and spending more than $41 million. Experts emphasize that Kazakhstan has strong potential to expand coal exports to Europe. Recent heat waves across the continent have increased electricity demand, which in turn raised the need for thermal coal. Fuel prices in Europe have risen, and Kazakhstan remains one of the region's reliable suppliers. And future export trends will largely depend on gas prices and coal stock levels at European ports. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A News.
A new survey data from Armenia reveals growing dissatisfaction among citizens, especially young people, towards the country's current political and social direction. The survey was conducted by the International Republican Institute and highlights a complex picture of public sentiment towards Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's government and the ongoing peace process with Azerbaijan. Here's our detailed report.
The latest survey by the International Republican Institute shows almost half of Armenia's population, 49%, believe the country is heading in the wrong direction. Only 36% think otherwise. This poses a challenge for Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, particularly as dissatisfaction runs high among Armenia's youth. Nearly half of those aged between 18 and 35 expressed discontent, despite the government's emphasis on policies aimed at this demographic. Yet, despite declining support, Pashinyan remains Armenia's most trusted politician, although with just 13% approval. Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan follows far behind with 5%, while former President Robert Kocharian received just 4%. Significantly, a striking 61% of respondents expressed trust in no political figure at all, indicating a growing disconnect between Armenian society and its political class. Youth disengagement is particularly evident. 63% of young Armenians either do not know who to support or have chosen not to vote at all. When asked about pressing issues, Armenians overwhelmingly pointed to security and border protection, followed by economic struggles, unemployment and rising costs. The survey also highlighted contrasting views on peace with Azerbaijan. While 47% support a peace treaty, significant opposition comes from younger Armenians. 48% reject the peace agreement, compared to 58% support among older generations. When asked about Prime Minister Pashinyan's priorities over the next 6 months, respondents emphasized peace, border security, army strengthening, and a shift in foreign policy. These top concerns align closely with the ongoing peace negotiations with Azerbaijan. These insights underscore a critical moment for Armenia. The government must urgently address youth dissatisfaction to build broader consensus on the peace agenda. For Azerbaijan, these findings strengthen arguments advocating constitutional changes in Armenia, ensuring lasting peace and stability in the region.
Previously, we discussed the declining popularity of Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan with Richard Girgosian, director of the Regional Studies Center from Yerevan. Here's a clip of what he told us.
Well, they are very relevant. This U.S. implemented public opinion survey is actually the most reliable that's conducted in Armenia. And the findings should be a wake-up call for the Armenian government. However, this does represent a snapshot in time. In other words, what's equally important here is not just the trend of declining popularity of the incumbent government, but that there is no alternative still. The opposition, widely discredited, has suffered an even greater decline. So in the end, this should be a wake-up call for the incumbent authorities, but nevertheless, it's not as significant as it would seem.
Pro-Kremlin political analyst Sergei Markov spoke to Russian Zagrad TV and claimed that the root current tensions between Moscow and Baku lies in a downed aircraft incident. According to Markov, Baku is demanding an apology for the incident with a Zal plane that took place near Aktu over the Caspian Sea in December 2024.
The reason for what is happening between Russia and Azerbaijan is undoubtedly the plane. As is known, we shot down the plane. They think that it is known for sure that we shot down the plane, and they know that our authorities also know for sure that they shot down the plane, and they want us to apologize the way they did when they shot down our helicopter.
Georgia has connected 5 solar power plants with a total capacity of 10 megawatts to its national grid, marking the first time solar energy has entered the country's transmission system. Supported by nearly $5 million in local bank funding, Georgia's economy ministry says this project is part of a broader renewable energy effort. Currently, 125 megawatts of wind power are under construction, with an additional 200 megawatts in development. The long-term goal is to strengthen energy security and enable electricity exports to Europe through a planned Black Sea cable. Lastly, A News is back on tour. The 3rd edition of A News Talks gets underway in Ankara, in Turkey. The theme for today's discussion is digital and cultural diplomacy in the AI era. A News Talks co-host Katie Wilson sent us this from the venue.
Yes, that's right. We are back on the road again, and it is time for the 3rd instalment of A News Talks. We started in Baku, we've been to Astana, and today we are in Ankara, capital of Turkey. And joining our host, Guy Sean, right here at Yildirim Bayezid University will be academics from a range of specialisms, including international relations, politics, and economics. And on the agenda today is digital and cultural diplomacy in the AI era. And not only that, but joining me later on today is a range of students who will be offering the next generation's perspectives on these issues shaping our world, namely artificial intelligence, diplomacy, and what that means for the Turkic world. So it's going to be a very busy day here in Ankara. We're setting up right in there and it's about to all get started. And if you're wondering where you'll be able to watch A News Talks, well, the full episodes will be airing very shortly on A News, so you will be able to catch up on all of these conversations.
That's all we have for now. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned to A News.